What is up, my YouTube friends? So here's the deal. Recently we've been having some SL problems. If you watch my first R129 video, at some point I mentioned something about getting a slight thump in the back during acceleration. As a bonus, when you step on it, you get this thump. So at that point, when we were doing this video, we were like, okay, it's a 20-plus-year-old car. What you gonna do? So we didn't worry too much about it, because it only happened during hard acceleration, under hard acceleration. But as we drove it, as we started to put more miles on it, it started to getting more and more prominent, more frequent. So we scratch our heads. What's the first thing to do in such a scenario, in such situation? The very first thing to do when you're experiencing some problems with AT, automatic transmissions, is to change the fluids. So Wojtek picked up the OEM Mercedes transmission fluid. He left the car at the workshop. One day later, he's picking up the car with the fluid changed, and he's told to drive the car, to put some miles on it, and the issue is going to go away. And guess what? It didn't. So we scratched our heads again. What we're gonna do? So Wojtek picks up his phone and starts calling some local Mercedes specialists, some mechanics, some transmission specialists, and seeking some advice. And the advice that he got was pretty inconsistent, to say the least.
Advice? You guys all give me different advice.
The advice that he got from the specialists was all over the place. It ranged from lockup valve to torque converter to a complete rebuild of the transmission. On a 105,000 miles car? I don't think so. So we scratched our heads again, and 2 days of thorough and intense internet research, Wojtek came up with the first suspect in this case. So he orders the part, leaves the car at the shop. 2 days later he picks up the car, and guess what? This time he was right. And without further ado, come on, we're gonna reveal the thing responsible for all this mess. Come on. It turned out to be this conductor plate. It's a pretty simple item. As you can see, it's a single piece of plastic with some elements, and the part that went wrong is this here, this round element that's gotten loose, and you can see there's a fracture on it. Okay, so the takeaway of the story is that if you're experiencing a jerkiness under hard acceleration, not only during all kinds of driving scenarios, on these cars, the very first thing to do, to look for, is this thing. Because the whole this whole thing, so the part including labor, costs Wojtek around $300, something like this. Maybe 400 including the labor cost. So we strongly advise you to check this part if you're experiencing some problems on these cars. Not only these cars, because the 722.6 transmission in the 90s, in the early 2000s, was the transmission that went to all kinds of cars. So look for it. And the funny part is that this whole situation could have been avoided, because back when Wojtek was changing the transmission fluid, what he should have done was checking for fault codes on the ECU of the car, because even though it's an older transmission, there was an ECU fault code in the ECU memory, so it didn't have to be hit or miss, because the fault code indicated clearly what the problem was, but he didn't do it, so he had to pay twice. So the reason why we're sharing this, to save you all the money, all the time,